Well, hello. My name is Brian Bowen, and welcome to Apologetics 101, where you learn the facts the critics don't want you to know. Now, today we're going to do the second part to the series that I've been working on, Alleged Bible Contradictions, where we're going to go through we're not going to go through all of them, okay? Just to let you know ahead of time, we are not going to be going through all of these alleged Bible contradictions. All right, this is not intended to be exhaustive. What we're basically doing is giving you a good idea of how to respond to these, and to understand that a lot of times, they're assuming that the account has to be complete. They're assuming omission of details is same as denying it, and a lot of times they're kind of twisting the facts a lot, and they're trying to reword the verses to make them look like they're trying to butt heads. And ultimately, now I know I told you I was going to do the resurrection narratives, but when I started to go through these alleged Bible contradictions, I suddenly realized there's a lot involving crucifixion that I wanted to put in. So, and probably more than what I would have for a video. So I decided to do the crucifixion narratives, and then next week I'm going to do a bunch, probably surrounding the trial of Jesus, the burial, the empty tomb, and that's it for that. And also there's a couple that I realized that I didn't get in this video involving Passover and the crucifixion, and a couple of them that I want to try to touch on. So it's going to be a big video next time around. But this one I decided to focus on 10 alleged Bible contradictions that are proposed. And last time I went to the arguments of Bar Ehrman. Today I'm going to some of the internet atheists. I started looking up several sites on internet atheists that have had over alleged Bible contradictions. The one that seems to be easier able to access because it was all there, and also the one that appears, all of them appear to be borrowing from each other. They're usually the same objections, usually worded somewhat different. And often enough, they contain repetition. They repeat the same things over and over. Almost every one of them have a disclaimer saying that we know that these might have plausible explanations to them. We know that a lot of them might not even be, or they'll say some of them might not even be contradictions. But we're going to put them in there anyhow because they look like they are. They look like they are from their perspective. They don't think that a God should be able to allow such things that they themselves would not be able to pick them out. But that's not possible because, they're going to pick things out. That skeptic will ultimately, if someone really wants to find something wrong, they'll figure out some way to make it wrong in their mind. And a lot of these get reworded just so that they can make something wrong, even beyond what the actual text actually says. And they go beyond what the text actually says. And that's just what we end up dealing with. A lot of they're using the King James only Bible translation, of course. I guess if you're a skeptic and you really, really wanted to believe that the Bible had errors in it, I guess the one you probably use in translation is probably the King James Version Bible that was translated in 1601 or 1604 to 1611. But now they made several different reasons. At least this particular site made several different reasons why they did that. Most of them bogus. One in particular is probably more reasonable than all of them because King James don't have no copyright restrictions on it. I can understand that one. But when it comes to all the other objections, all because of its perceived popularity and authority, it's only popular among certain groups, and most Christians aren't King James onlyists anymore. So, so it winds up strawmanning a lot, and it winds up wording with it. And they said, well, a lot of Bible translations edit it, that's what infidel.org try to say. But the reality is that what they're basically saying is that they know these things are contradictions, so they edit it so it wouldn't look like a contradiction. It's not the case. They're going by the Greek and they're looking at the Bible translations our knowledge of Greek has increased since the time the King James translation came out. Our language, English, that it was translated to, has changed over time. There's a lot of outdated terms used in the King James Version. It's not used anymore. So it's also the way that they translate it sometimes. The King James translators wasn't as knowledgeable in Greek as they were in Latin. They were more knowledgeable in Latin. So, there's all kinds of other issues, and there's textual issues, because the primary Greek behind the King James is the Desiderius Erasmus's TR, otherwise known as the received text. And that's the main Greek behind the King James Version. And Desiderius Erasmus had less than half a dozen Greek New Testament manuscripts to work with. He didn't even have a Greek version of the Book of Revelation at the time. He had to borrow a friend's, and he was missing, I think, the last 18 verses of it. So, yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why there would be errors in the King James Version, or the way it's worded, or the way it's translated, or based on the Greek in which it's translated from, and there's all kinds of other issues that can occur. So if you're going to get a translation and attack the Bible, that's the one you probably want to get. The problem, however, is that most Christians are knowledgeable about these things nowadays, and they usually don't get fooled by it that easy. But in any given case, Christians believe that the original manuscripts that was penned by the prophets and the apostles was inspired and inerrant, not a Bible translation. So that's interesting to note as well. Like I said, they're borrowing from each other. So basically, it doesn't matter what site you go to, you're basically essentially getting the same thing, because they're just rewording it, borrowing each other's material, using it. There's a graph that I think it was created by Sam Harris, if I'm not mistaken, but a lot of other atheists have used that same graph in their own sites. So they got that as well. In any given case, I decided to focus on one particular site because it was just easier to scroll and get this information, and that's infidel.org. I cite it on occasion throughout, especially if I'm quoting directly from it. But as far as the alleged contradictions, that's primarily what I'm getting it from. Just because they worded a certain way and they snuck words in there that wasn't said in the text and things like that. And like I said, they're one of the ones that had the disclaimer. It's essentially like saying, we know that most of these arguments are bad, but we're going to use them anyhow because they sound good to us, in spite of how bad they are. But in any case, I hope you enjoy it. That's what we have on our plate today, the Crucifixion Narratives. So let's begin. Like I said, we've got 10 alleged Bible contradictions centered around Jesus' death by crucifixion that we're going to get to. It's not intended to be exhaustive, but I do want to at least go just real briefly cover the ground rules real quick. Understand, I'm not going to be covering these every single time that we do. In fact, I'll probably take it off here on OBS after this. I just want to go over it real quick just to kind of give you a refresher and just kind of keep these ground rules in mind. The burden of proof is on the skeptic. Remember, at Christians, we do not have the burden of proof. They'll try to make you think we have the burden of proof. We don't have the burden of proof because we're not the ones who's asserting that there's errors. They have the burden of proof. They have to demonstrate it. Simply assuming it, presupposing it, arguing their way into a circle, committing all kinds of logical fallacies, throwing their objections out there and assuming just because they throw the objection out there means it must be an error. No, that's not how this works. They have to demonstrate it. And where I come from, demonstration means evidence. All right, number 2, the Bible is innocent until proven guilty. That's a normal historical practice. It's how we normally approach normal historical sources. It's also how we normally deal with people in general. Someone comes up to me and tells me that they saw a friend the other day. I'm not going to just say, okay, do you have documentation? Did you do a video camera of it? I'm not going to do all that, because the reality is that I'm going to take him at his word and give him the benefit of the doubt. And that's what we do with any source. We give them the benefit of the doubt unless we got reasons otherwise. All right, number 3, an error in a later manuscript copy does not equal an error in the original. We've already discussed this. Complementary details are not errors. When one gospel adds information another gospel leaves out, that's not an error. You can't take one point and make it contradict a missing point. That's not how it happens. It has to have 2 actual points of disagreement. All right, number 4, complementary details are not errors. Omission of details are not a denial of that detail. That's going to be very important. It's going to come up a lot in this this series. After this, like I said, I'm not going to be showing these ground rules anymore, so kind of keep that in mind. Addition of details does not mean such details are exhaustive. All right. Okay. That again, the fact that the content of the Gospels does not in any way mean that the content must contain all information that ever happened. Okay, so we have to get out of arguing from silence. A lot of these objections will argue from silence. 7, harmonization efforts are not bad historical methods, nor does it mean one must take upon themselves the skeptic's presuppositions, which is now being forced upon him or her. This is a common one that Bart Ehrman does, trying to force his presuppositions onto us by making us feel like that we have to accept errors in the Bible, even if no errors is ever demonstrated to us. Number 8, the presence of literary devices or conventions does not mean that such liberties are errors. Rather, they should be viewed in light of how ancient literatures were written at that time, and is therefore viewed in light of situational liberties that is taken by the writer to properly communicate their information with more clarity while working off their current limitations. In other words, they're going to write the way people wrote their literature at that time. This is what we expect of them. We do not expect anything different of them, all right? This idea that somehow that we have to judge them by the standards of our day. They're going to use things like time compression, displacement, transference, and these are the kind of things that we'll see also in the Gospels, and as we're reviewing these alleged Bible contradictions. All right. Lack of precision is not an error. Things like paraphrasing, approximations, summaries or summations, abbreviations, estimations, rounded numbers, etc. are not errors. This will come up not only throughout the series, but even in this particular video, we'll see this, where that they will not be precise. Like, say the color of Jesus' robe. That's one of the alleged Bible contradictions we're going to be talking about today, and whether it's purple or red, and they're not being precise, they're not being exact, but they're going to be close enough to what it is. I mean, they're not holding a color wheel up to it and figuring out what color it is and that sort of thing. Precision, lack of precision is not an error. Okay, they don't have to be precise to be telling the truth. All right. Number 10, the existence of, or even the possibility of, errors, differences, contradictions, apparent contradictions, or even irreconcilable differences do not make the core details that are agreed upon wrong, nor does it make a small few of them make the source in question unreliable. Even if we approach something and we got a couple really difficult ones, that would not necessarily, even if they were errors, that would not necessarily make the source flawed, and it wouldn't make the core details wrong, because the core details are the ones that the Gospels agree on. The Gospels agree on that Jesus died by crucifixion, for example. So that has to be taken into effect, even if such errors exist. Now, I don't think that such errors exist. I've never seen any demonstrated. Any of these alleged Bible contradictions ever get demonstrated as errors. All right. Like I said, we got a lot to go over. This is not intended to be exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination. There's a whole lot more we could say on that. We might forget some particular alleged Bible contradiction, or maybe your favorite one that you like talking about, or something like that. And I'm sorry about that, but there's usually the sites that promote this stuff will often promote about 400 and something. Usually it's not actually that many. A lot of times this is what I found very common among these sites. They'll repeat the same ones. They'll take one that they've already used. I've actually seen them use one, and then the very next alleged Bible contradiction was a rewording of the previous one. They did that just to have more alleged Bible contradictions. So a lot of these were repeated. So it's actually a lot less. Even the supposed contradictions are a lot less than what they make it out, because they repeat a lot of them. I think I found like 2 or 3 on the infidel.org site, maybe 3 or 4, that was over the potter's field. I mean, you only need one objection over that, but they made 3 or 4 out of them somehow. But yeah, that's not how we do historical investigation. But let's just dive in. We got a lot to cover here. All right, this is our first one. Alleged contradiction number 1. Alleged Bible contradiction number 1. What was the color of Jesus' robe? Was it scarlet? Matthew 27:28. Now these are going to be worded just the way that they word it. Purple. Mark 15:17 and John 19:2. We just got through talking about that one. This is our very first one. I didn't realize it was our very first one. Well, let's look at some Bible quotes. Matthew 27:28, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Now understand, I'm not going to probably be citing the Bible verses every single time. Sometimes they got them right, but if I think or suspect that they might have messed up a little bit on it, or changed things around, I might go directly to the Bible verse, or if I have to, in order to show specifics within the context. All right, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. ESV, that's the Bible translation that I'm using. Mark 15:17, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him. And John 19:2, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. All right, let's continue. All right, let's look at the Greek word for purple. It is prefer. All right, that's the Greek word prefer. The meaning is a species of shellfish that yielded a purple dye, highly esteemed by the ancients. Its tint about a bright crimson. According to Mounts and Mounts, the Zondervan Greek and English Interlinear New Testament, in the back of the Greek dictionary, NSB, NIV, page 1146. Also, this is the word that John uses in his gospel for the word purple. It's preferred. And it basically is that shellfish that was very common to that area. It had a special purplish dye, but it had a bright crimson or reddish tint to it. Now, when I was little, me and my sister had these couple of sisters that lived next door to us that was friends with us. And one of the girls' hair, I mentioned, was blonde. My sister said, no, it's red. And we had this long, ongoing discussion back and forth, because I thought it was blonde. She thought it was red. Well, which is it? Is it blonde or red? At that time, I was a little kid at the time. I didn't realize there was actually a type of hair color called strawberry blonde. Which one was right? We both were. It was a type of blondish hair that had a reddish tint to it. in a similar way, we're looking at a dye that's purplish, that gives it kind of a purplish color, but it is got a bright reddish tint to it. So you got to understand, this is from the observation of someone looking at what's going on here, and they see and one guy saying they see a purplish robe on him, and the other one saying, no, it looks reddish. They're both right. Lack of precision is not an error. We've already discussed that. The robe. Now there's another resolution, another one offered. It could be because one reference mentioned one mentioned a cloak while the other one mentioned a robe. So I think maybe even one mentioned the cloak and two mentions the robe. Matthew and John mentioned the robe, and the cloak is mentioned by Mark. And so the guy offered a solution that maybe it's both a robe and cloak. It could be two different colors. That's possible too. However, that one just doesn't seem as plausible. The most plausible explanation would probably be because of the observational of the person observing it. It would look purplish to one person and reddish to another, because it's like a color somewhere in between purple and red. And so that most likely is the case. All right. Then what is the resolution? The resolution is the robe was probably a reddish purple. It was somewhere in between. It's not precise, not exact. It's probably not what you would like, if your aim is precision. But in ancient times, their aim was a precision. They weren't trying to be precise. They weren't trying to be exact. They weren't trying to be detailed. Rather, instead, they were trying to just record accurate information. And this will require, lack of precision is an error. So all they have to do is get in the right ballpark. If they're at least somewhere in between reddish purple, that's fine. Just like someone who estimates, like if I say, if something costs me $563 and I say that cost me $500, I'm not in error because I estimated around it down. I went down to the larger number, I ain't worried about the 63 as much as I am the 500. So that was my emphasis, right? So it's not a big deal. It's just based on observation. Really, this is actually not that hard of to figure out. Let's move on to the next alleged Bible contradiction. All right, alleged contradiction number 2. Who carried Jesus' cross? Okay, Simon of Cyrene, Matthew 27:32, Mark 15:21, and Luke 23:36. Jesus carries it himself with no help from no one. That's infidel.org. They said that. With no help from no one. John 19:17. Resolution. This is easy. You already know what the resolution is. Jesus and Cyrene both carried Jesus' cross. The reality is that John's actually doesn't actually, let's see. John's actually doesn't say he doesn't have help from no one. You'll see in a minute. Matthew 27:32. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. Mark 15:21, and they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Luke 23:26, and as they led him away, they seized one, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him on the cross to carry it behind Jesus. Okay, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all agree, so the issue's over John. Well, John says 19:17, and he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of a skull, which is in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Now, this part where it says bearing his own cross, I think that's where they think, he must have carried it all himself. No, That doesn't mean he carried it all the way. What it means is that he was made to carry his own cross, which was typical in that day. Roman culture made it where you had to carry your own cross. But Jesus' body was weak from flogging because he received a more serious beating than typical. And he collapses on the way to the medical doctors say that he would have suffered from massive amount of blood loss, which is also why he collapsed. Well, Simon of Cyrene, now normally they would not normally ask someone else to help you carry the cross, but by Roman law, the centurion can help carry or be told to carry a burden. A centurion could tell a passerby to carry a burden up to a mile. So, in other words, they would have to do what he says. It's basically like a traffic cop. Like the law in our land, a traffic cop or a traffic worker tells you to do something, by law, you're supposed to do it. If they tell you run the red light because they're working on there or whatever, you have to run a red light. In a similar manner, if a centurion says carry this, you have to go carry it. So he had to carry it under Roman law. So John's account isn't saying he's carried it all the way. He's saying he was made to carry his own cross. And this doesn't really contradict any of the passages. None of the passages are saying that Jesus didn't carry his own cross, because that was normal custom. In fact, they all admit that he's carrying it, but Simon of Cyrene is made to help him because he couldn't carry it all the way. So the most likely resolution is this. The most likely resolution is this. Jesus and Cyrene both carried Jesus' cross. And I wrote additionally a note. These accounts are complementary, not contradictory. John's account does not claim he carried the whole way without help, only that he was made to carry his own cross, talking about Jesus, which were customary of the Romans. So the answer is that they both carried it. It's just complementary information. All right, which is not an error. Let's move on to contradiction number 3. What was inscribed on Jesus' cross? This was almost laughable. I'm surprised that they really thought that they had us on this one. Matthew 27:37, this is the King of the Jews. Mark 15:26, the King of the Jews. Luke 23:38, this is the King of the Jews. Or John 19:19, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Yes, they really thought this was worth putting it in print. All right, resolution number 1. It contains portions of what was written on the sign. If you notice, now some of these will have multiple resolutions to them. That usually means that they have multiple philosophical defeaters. That shows that they're not errors because there's other alternatives. And so it's good that they have multiple explanations. I won't always go through all the multiple explanations. I'll go through probably mainly the one that I think is the most plausible. But here I just happened to list 2 resolutions. Both I think are equally plausible. But if you notice all 4, what is the most common core element? The King of the Jews. And it was very commonplace to put the charge, what they're being charged with, on the cross. And so all of them have that. And so it would be plausible that if this just contained portions of it, like the King of the Jews is what all of them has. It says, this is the King of the Jews. Or this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. And this other one says, this is the King of the Jews without the Jesus in it. And the other one says, this Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. So, I mean, what it likely said, it probably said, this is the King of the this is Jesus, the King of the Jews, or this is Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. But they might have put Jesus of Nazareth, but it's doubtful. They probably just put Jesus. Maybe they put Jesus of Nazareth. I don't know. But the idea is that it's still talking about Jesus. It's still basically They don't have to be verbatim, word for word agreement to be exact. They don't have to be exact. They don't have to be precise. Remember, lack of precision is not an error. So it's not uncommon that they could be paraphrasing it. That they might, it could be a translational thing. That sort of thing. Now that's one plausible explanation. There is another plausible explanation I'll put on there. Resolution number 2. John tells us that the sign was written in multiple languages. Many of the Jews read the inscriptions, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Aramaic, in Latin, and in Greek. John 19:20 ESV. Each of these Gospels could have back translated from these languages to Greek, or even left it in Greek, which would have accounted for the differences. This was brought by one book that I have by Dr. Jason Lau, who also brought this explanation, and I think it is a plausible one. I think it is a plausible explanation because John does report on that. I cited to you the Bible verse of that, and he reports that this is actually referenced in 3 different languages. If they are, depending on which language they're translating it from, would depend greatly on how it's worded. So that could explain for the differences as well, and I think it is equally plausible as the other one. All right, let's move on to the next alleged Bible contradiction. Alleged contradiction number 4. Which one of the thieves had taunt Jesus on the cross? Both of them, Matthew 27:44, or one of them, Luke 23:34-42. Look how these alleged Bible contradictions are worded. They're often worded in a way that makes them look like they're butting heads with each other. They do that on purpose. Like, how many women was at the tomb? Was it this many, or was it only Mary Magdalene, like John said? It's worded a certain way to make them look like they're butting heads when they actually don't in the actual text. So you see both of them, see one of them, think, only one of them said it, and it doesn't actually say only one. For all we know, both of them could have repented before their death. We don't know that. All we're given is a certain amount of information. All right. Resolution. Both of them mocked Jesus at a different time, and later one of them converted while on the cross. Deathbed conversions happen even today. People on their deathbed, they realize death often comes across in people's mind very final. And people start wondering, well, what if I'm wrong about the afterlife? What if I'm wrong about heaven and hell? What if there really is a place like hell and I'm going right to it? What if I really do need to repent to Jesus? And so deathbed conversions do happen. A friend of mine actually, he was on his deathbed. He died. He was on his deathbed, and a nurse heard him praying and repenting for all the things that he'd done wrong, I guess. And she told his wife, who told me and my wife. And so, yeah. But deathbed conversions happen all the time. Of course, I think my friend might have been saved before that, but he knew he was about to die, and when death hits you, it gets real quick for a lot of people. So not everybody's like that, but there are people that have been known to convert on their deathbeds. That's not uncommon, and so this is not unusual at all that this person could have converted on the cross. Jesus was on the cross for 3 hours, and I'll say this constantly because I'm gonna let me go ahead and read this note first, and I'll explain what I mean by this. Jesus was on the cross for 3 hours. In that time frame, one of the thieves converted. Deathbed conversions are not at all uncommon. Unfortunately, the skeptic has a freeze frame mentality where he thinks even in a lengthy span of time, any one event must stay true as it is. Okay, basically what I mean by freeze frame mentality, it's like they read one gospel and it's over a course of a span of time, and they assume it's got to always be that way. Like they won't allow the women to move closer to the cross at any given time. Like they have to stay far away the entire 3 hours that they're watching it. that sort of thing. They won't allow them to move. They won't allow them to say anything different. That's why I call freeze frame mentality. They just kind of freeze their actions in one gospel, and when another gospel reports they did do some other stuff within that span of time, or they said other things in that span of time, all of a sudden they scream contradiction where there isn't any. All right, let's move on to the next contradiction. We're getting these pretty good here. Contradiction number 5, forsaken or not forsaken. Matthew 27:46. Jesus asked God why he had forsaken him. John 10:30. Jesus says that he and the Father are one. These are not even related to one another. And they put these up there. You can almost, if you wanted to, you can look through the Bible and you could just track this stuff down and pin things that aren't even relative to each other and make them look like they're contradicting themselves. Some of these things that the skeptics are coming up with will. All right. Resolution. This is a misinterpretation of Jesus' reference to the Father in Matthew 27:46 and concerning John 10:30. Note, Jesus being one and the same with the Father is taken in a completely different context from Matthew 27:46. These 2 points are not only not at odds with each other, they are not even talking about the same things. Jesus being one and the same with the Father. You could probably make a deity quote. Like there's lots of really good citations that you can pull out from the Bible on the deity of Christ. But this one's probably not the best, because this might be like him saying they're one and the same in mission and that sort of thing. But the Trinity doctrine claims that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are the same in being, but they're distinct in person. So how is Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? A contradiction of Jesus saying, I and the Father are one. We're dealing with different situations, different contexts, different historical situations and contexts that are going on, and yet they have nothing to do with each other. Yet the skeptic thinks they're at odds with each other, when in reality they're not. And Jesus asking, my God, why are you forsaking me, was actually the first verse of Psalm 22, which is the righteous sufferer. So when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me, he's applying Psalm 22 to himself. It's like he's saying, I am the righteous sufferer of Psalm 22. He was applying the entire psalm to himself. And if you read the psalm, it actually ends with the God vindicating the righteous sufferer. So this isn't a contradiction. It is complete. It's them picking apart unrelated, completely irrelevant verses that have nothing to do with each other, taking them out of context and making them look like they're butting heads. And they're not even doing a good job of making them look like they're butting heads. They're obviously not relative to each other. Yeah, let's move on. All right, number 6 on our Alleged Bible Contradictions. What was Jesus' last recorded words? Going through these a lot of times, it's just like, why? Why do you think these are contradictions? I don't know. All right, Matthew 27:46 through 50. And Mark 15:34 through 37. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? We dealt with some of that. Luke 23:46. Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. Remember, they're using the King James. John 19:30. It is finished. Jesus is not allowed to say more than one thing on the cross. Actually, none of these actually really say that's Jesus' last word. Matthew's account is interesting. Let's first of all, let's steal a quote by infidel.org. I want to show you what they said specifically. All right, here's what they said. This is a quote from their website, infidel.org. You got the website at the bottom there. All right. Even though both Matthew and Mark allegedly represent direct quotes and are translated similarly, the actual Greek words used for God are different. Matthew uses Eli and Mark uses Eloi. This is a reference to their the statement that they made, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. Um, uh, it's just that they use different forms of the word God. I don't know where the skeptic was really going with this. He never really says. It seems to be that he's insinuating either that is also a difference that's a contradiction, which is not, or they're talking about some other God. Either one is flawed. Ellie. Okay, let me. Let's look at some citations here. Okay. Let me go ahead and read you what they actually said. Matthew 27:46-50. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Mark 15:34-37. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? All right. All right. Resolution. Both are true, and these are not contradictory accounts, but complementary accounts. Matthew's account does not claim this is the last thing he had said, nor did Mark's. Rather, in verse 50, Matthew says that, and Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. In other words, he actually said some other stuff. Matthew just doesn't tell us what he said. So this is not the last thing he said to begin with. Okay, I put note. Both of these accounts use different forms of the Hebrew word Elohim, which is what they're using. It's transliterated to the Greek, but it's Elohim. It's a different form of Elohim. Like there's like lots of different forms in the Old Testament of Elohim. Like Isaiah 9:6, for example, says El. When it calls Jesus mighty God, it says El Gabor, transliterate like El, but that's a form of Elohim, and there's several different forms of it. So all they did was use two different forms. But here's the thing: both Matthew and Luke had. Look at this. Let me go back. Look at that. They both tell you that this is, and then they quote it in Greek, and here's what they said: my God, why have you forsaken me? The Greek there is ha theos mu, my God. It uses theos, the Greek word for God, and it's the regular Greek word that's usually used throughout the New Testament for God. So in other words, they're not saying someone different. It's just languages. It's just the way the language is, and it's really bad when you do that. And I don't know what their emphasis were, but I don't even know if they even had a place where they were going. But it was terrible. Like I said, so note both of these accounts use different forms of the Hebrew word Elohim, God, transliterated to Greek. However, both accounts then translates and interprets it properly. Both of them using the same Greek word for God, theos. All right, let's move on to contradiction number 7, or alleged contradiction number 7, as it were. What did Jesus drink on the cross? Vinegar, Matthew 27:48, Luke 23:36, and John 19:19. Wine and myrrh, which he didn't drink, Mark 15:23. Whatever he drank, wherever the drink was, Jesus did drink it, John 19:29-30. Which I don't know why they even put that last reference there, because they'd already put John 19:19 up here as claiming it was vinegar. Okay, really this is just a misunderstanding of what they mean by vinegar or sour wine. Sour wine and vinegar was talking about the same thing. Let me cite some the Bible verses first. Matthew 27:48, and one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. ESV. And straightway one of them ran. This is the KJV. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it to him and drank. KJV. So I decided to look it up in KJV just to see if it translates the same. Luke 23:36. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine. This is the same thing as the vinegar. John 19:29. A jar full of sour wine stood there, so they put a sponge full of sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. John 19:29-30. A jar full of sour wine stood there, so they put a sponge full of sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. In verse 30, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished," and bowed his head and gave up the spirit. KJV, now there was a vessel full of vinegar, and they filled a sponge with vinegar and put it into upon a hyssop and put it on his mouth. Verse 30, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished," and he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. All right. It's review marks. All right. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. ESV. Okay, note, myrrh was a spice mixed in with the drinks, including pasca or vinegar, which we're fixing to get into because we're fixing to get into the Greek word that is being used there. It actually means the same thing, whether it's sour wine or vinegar. We're going to cover that first before we cover the second half of that objection, whether they drank it or didn't drink it. All right. The Greek word there is oxos. Okay. It means vinegar, a wine of sharp flavor, meaning it's bitter. Pasca, it's a technical name for it, which was an ordinary beverage and was often mixed with bitter herbs, etc. And this given to the condemned criminals in order to stupefy them and lessen their suffering. Again, mounts and mounts. The Zondervan Greek and English Interlinear New Testament, NSB and NIV, page 1125. All right. Essentially, this was a very bitter drink. What they would do is they would give this to crucified, condemned victims to lessen their suffering. It's like if you're taking pity on the person, even though the person is being punished for something they did wrong or allegedly did wrong, you're still taking pity on them, and they're trying to give them vinegar in order to kind of stupefy them to lessen their suffering. And that's the whole idea behind it. Now, they often mix them with bitter herbs. Myrrh, he said, remember the objection said, well, Mark said it's wine mixed with myrrh. And it was intended. The objection was intended to make it look like, oh, that's a contradiction because the others don't mention, because that doesn't mean they're denying it. Okay. Mark gives us complimentary information. He tells us myrrh is a spice that's actually one of the spices that they can use into the drink. That's the reason why it's mentioned. And it's mixed in there. The spices were often used to help flavor it, kind of like flavoring carb syrup or something, just to make it taste a little better going down. Now, what about what they said about the drink or not drink? All four Gospels had Jesus tasting the same thing, namely vinegar. Mark not only reports Jesus tasting the sour wine, vinegar, but the spice they mixed into it. So this is complementary information, but not contradictory. Mark's account, as well as Matthew's account, which Matthew said he tasted it, but afterwards refused to drink it, verse 34, both acknowledge Jesus tasting it, but then recorded his refusal to drink it. None of the four Gospels shows any inconsistency involving what Jesus had drank or didn't drink. Rather, instead, the skeptic refused to look at what the passages were saying. They didn't look at the context at all, because it actually says that like Matthew's count kind of contains a little bit more fuller count, where they put the sponge to the lip so they could taste it, and he rejected it. So in other words, he tasted the wine, but then rejected drinking it, being given actually in the form of a drink. And he rejected that. So it's not, he didn't drink the wine, he just tasted it because they put a sponge stain to his lips on a hyssop branch. Probably because they were too busy figuring out how to word the text to make it sound like it butts heads when it didn't. This usage shows someone that is truly grasping at straws. Alright, let's move on to contradiction number 8. Alleged Bible contradiction number 8. Alleged contradiction number 8. What did the centurion say? Truly, this was the Son of God. Matthew 27:54. Truly, this was the Son of God. Mark 15:39. Truly, this man was innocent or righteous. Luke 23:47. All right. The reference to truly this was Son of God, Matthew 27:54. Truly this man was the Son of God. The only thing that really Mark adds to it is the word man. And the only one really different is Luke's. We'll get to that here in a second. All right, let's look at the citation. Matthew 27:54. When the centurion and those who were with him keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, truly, this was the Son of God. Mark 15:39. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. Luke 23:47. Now, when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, certainly this man was innocent. Resolution. Matthew and Mark are both saying nearly the exact same thing, with only Mark adding the word man, which doesn't alter the meaning of what either account says. Only Luke is really different, but this appears to be entirely another statement altogether with no internal evidence to the contrary. The skeptic appears to assume that when the centurion said in Matthew and Mark must be the only thing the centurion was allowed to say, with the centurion restricted only to those words. However, this is not at odds with Matthew and Mark, because this statement does not counter it. Instead, Luke appears to be adding complementary information to what Matthew and Mark had already added. All right, let's move on. Alleged contradiction number 9. Where was the women standing? This was funny. From afar, Matthew 27:55, Mark 15:40, and Luke 23:49, or close up, like John says in John 19:25 through 26. Resolution. This one's easy. Jesus was crucified for 3 hours, and the women were allowed to move in that time. This is another example of the skeptic. Skeptic having what I call freeze frame mentality, because in the mind of the skeptic, the women are frozen in place in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but the women were not allowed to move closer in John's gospel. John is simply recording complementary information, and the skeptic is looking for an inconsistency where none exists. Can you just imagine how this would work or something? Jesus on the cross for 3 hours, and here's one of the Marys, and she goes, hey, Mary, why don't we move closer? And she's like, I can't. The skeptic has nailed my feet to the ground. 3 hours. Not allowed to move in that time. Can't move closer. Got to stay right where we are. Now, of course, there's also another resolution. I didn't really mention that in the presentation, but there's actually another possibility. There's several women that actually supported his ministry. We don't even know how many women there was. We know that there was several. There were several that are named. Well, we don't know how many. And you're dealing with a group of people like that. It's like any other people, some might move closer, some might, stay where they are. So there's also the possibility that some of the women could have moved closer while others stayed afar off. But again, I guess they assumed that not only can they not allow to move, but all of them have to stay right where they are. All right, let's get to the last one here. Alleged contradiction number 10. What hour was Jesus crucified? Third hour, Mark 15:25. Sixth hour, John 19:14 through 15. Resolution. Okay. John is actually referring to the time in which Pilate was questioning Jesus. And I actually looked this up. This was during the time of Pilate's questioning. This was not during his crucifixion. He hadn't started being crucified. This was actually during the trial that it referenced the 9th hour. Mark and John appears to be using two different standards of time. Mark appears to be using the Jewish standard of time, which was from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for daylight and reverse for nighttime. However, John appears to be using the Roman standard for telling time, which is the same as ours, midnight to midnight. This would mean the third hour in Mark was the same as 9 o'clock a.m., and John had recorded the time in which Pilate had questioned Jesus before he was crucified at 6 o'clock a.m. Roman time, 3 hours prior to the crucifixion. The skeptic appears to be ignorant of how these two groups recorded time differently. However, there is no inconsistency here. Once this information is considered, any apparent contradiction seems to go away. So, I've been poring over these alleged Bible contradictions for the last couple weeks, and there's a lot of repeating them, there's a lot of rewording them, there's a lot of wording them in a way to try to make them butt heads. A lot of times they're not looking at the context, they're not considering background, they're not considering history, they're not considering literature, they're not considering that stuff. Some of these things weren't even relative to each other, as we saw. Some of them were just kind of nonsensical. I mean, there's one account that I saw in infidels.org where they actually said, who participated in creation? Was it God, like this verse says, or was it Jesus? This might confuse even more skeptics. Actually, the Bible teaches that all three persons of the Trinity were involved in creation, even the Spirit. Oh no, contradiction! Not contradiction. This is what we call, when skeptics apply this, as bifurcation fallacy or the either-or fallacy. And it's just not the case. Even if you don't believe in the Trinity, but there's no reason that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit cannot all be part of the creation process. And of course, the Bible describes all three persons of the Trinity as God. Not as three gods, but as one God. But three persons sharing the same nature, which is God. And so, yeah. So this kind of thing, though, you see this happening all the time in alleged Bible contradictions. And once you take out all the repetitional ones, the ones that just kind of takes the same ones over and over again and use them in all sorts of interesting ways, I mean, you kind of applaud them for their imagination and for their creativity, and for their desperation to really, really want to shatter the Bible, but having so much difficulty in trying to do that. So much so they themselves a lot of times admit that a lot of these arguments are bad, but they use them anyhow. Even though they know they're bad, even though they know they're plausible explanations for them, even though they're reaching. But anyway, that's all I have for you for today. I'll probably will have more for you next time on the next video of Alleged Bible Contradictions. I'm thinking my Bart Ehrman series is going to come to an end. Might be the next video I'll be doing is the fourth part, I think, to the Bart Ehrman series. In which case, I'll end that series, and I might, don't hold me to it, but I'm thinking about doing a Genesis series. I'm not going to go into all the details yet, but I am thinking about doing a Genesis series, specifically over certain issues and arguments for existence of God, for the creation of the world, Genesis 1 and 2. Lots of heavy controversy, even within the Christian church, over those matters. And talk about the flood and things like that. And of course, we'll get into some scientific issues as well. Something I really want to get on the show a lot that we don't get into as much as I would like. We usually deal mostly with the historical, but I would like to get into some of the scientific stuff as well. And I haven't done any videos on the existence of God yet on this channel, so it will be interesting to do that. But we'll see. We'll see how everything goes. Once I start scrolling back in, my videos are probably going to slow up more to a crawl than they are now. Right now, I'm able to put out more. My next video that I'm going to be producing, like I said, will be the last part to the Bart Ehrman series. One more video of that to end that series off. And this alleged Bible contradiction, when I start going through all these, it's going to be a lot larger than I thought it was going to be, because there's a lot of areas I want to cover. So this is going to be a very long series. I think it's going to be the longest one I've had on this channel. Don't hold me to it, but it probably will be. During that time, I'm making this series, and maybe if I do start the Genesis series, even during that time, I could still do other things. Maybe, do debate review or something like that. I've been meaning to do a couple of debate reviews. I haven't done in a while on this channel. So I'm probably going to be doing other stuff while I'm doing all that. Any given case, it's been fun for me. I really like this series. I hope you do too. Going through alleged Bible contradictions and stuff, it just gets kind of tiring to see the extent that people have gone to try to criticize the Bible. What they usually do is they take it apart. I mean, if they could, they would just rip it apart and take each individual verse and distort it and then try to make it look like they butt heads when they don't. And the reality is that that the evidence strongly favors the historical reliability of the Gospels and the Bible as a whole. And I think that that the benefit of the doubt should be given to the source. We have no reason to doubt the Bible or question it, so why not give the benefit of the doubt to the source? You say, yeah, but it's got all these differences. Yeah, but have you really looked at the context? Have you really considered the background, the history, the archaeology, the culture, textual criticism, manuscripts? Have you started considering all that stuff? Have you start considering differences in how things are translated and things like that? And look at the original languages. And context is a big one. This is one of the biggest reasons that they mess up, because they don't look at the context. Look at the Mark example with not drinking it. None of the others, they're saying that they gave him the wine and they put it to the lips, but he didn't drink it. He rejected drinking it. But they didn't look at the context. They didn't read further, like in Matthew's gospel. So this happens a lot in the alleged Bible contradictions. They don't look at the context, and they don't consider it fully the way they should. They're not really thinking on these things. They're just really just taking a surface level, very elementary level understanding of these things, and they're using that as a reason to pull the Bible apart, assuming it's guilty until proven innocent, make them look like they're butt heads, and then use that to in their minds, because they think it's discrediting the historicity of Scripture, when in reality it's not. All right. Well, that's all I have for you today. Remember, always stay in the know and learn the facts the critics don't want you to know. And I will see you on the next one. This is Brian Bowen from Apologetics 101, signing off.